My name is Ernestine. I am 31. I work in IT project coordination for a mid-sized healthcare company. I live in a busy metro area and keep a structured routine with early mornings, gym before work, and quiet nights most weekdays. My boyfriend is 28. We had been together just over 2 years. We lived together in a rented one-bedroom apartment for the last 9 months and split rent and utilities evenly. When we moved in together, it felt practical, more than romantic. Commutes were shorter, costs were lower, and our schedules mostly lined up. At least that was my assumption. He worked in digital marketing and freelanced on the side. His income fluctuated, which I did not mind. I covered groceries more often. He handled internet and streaming, and we kept things clean enough to avoid resentment. The first few months were fine, not perfect, but stable. Then his tone started changing in small ways that were easy to dismiss. Eye rolls when I talked about work, casual jokes about how predictable I was, comments about how people our age should be having more fun. None of it crossed a clear line, but it added up. He started going out more without me. After work, drinks that turned into late nights. New friends whose names changed every week. When I asked simple questions, he would say I was interrogating him. If I stayed quiet, he accused me of not caring enough. One night, after a minor argument about weekend plans, he leaned against the kitchen counter, smirked, and reminded me that he had options. Not in anger. Calm, almost bored, like he was explaining gravity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just nodded and told him to use them. At the time, I don't think he believed me. The next few days were awkward in that quiet, passive-aggressive way that makes you question your own sanity. He acted like nothing happened. Same routines, same apartment, same shared bed, but the temperature had changed. He was suddenly very aware of his phone, always angled away, always face down, always on silent. I didn't confront him, not because I was afraid to, but because I didn't see the point. When someone tells you they have options, they are already halfway out the door mentally. Arguing just gives them material. What had changed was my behavior. I stopped over-explaining myself, stopped adjusting my schedule around his, stopped checking in when he went out. I still did my share of chores, paid my half of the rent, cooked my meals. I just disengaged emotionally. He noticed within a week. He started fishing for reactions, loud sighs, comments about how distant I seemed. One night he asked if I was mad at him. I said, no, just busy. That bothered him more than anger would have. Then came the testing. He would casually mention women from work, women from the gym, a bartender who gave him free drinks. He framed it all as harmless stories, but he watched my face closely every time, waiting for jealousy, waiting for reassurance. I gave him none. The turning point came on a Friday night. We were getting ready to go to a friend's birthday thing. He was checking his outfit in the mirror and said almost offhand that one of his clients had asked him out for drinks sometime. Then he laughed and said he liked knowing he still had options. Same word again. Options. I looked up from tying my shoes and said calmly that if he felt the need to keep reminding me of that, maybe he should explore them. He stared at me like I'd broken the script. He asked if I was threatening to leave him. I told him no. I was just agreeing with his assessment of the situation. We went out that night, but something had shifted. He drank more than usual, talked louder, laughed harder, stayed glued to his phone. And that's when I noticed someone new sitting across the table, watching him a little too closely. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew exactly what she was. The woman across the table was new to the group, which he made a point of announcing. Her name was Marla, early 30s, sales, confident in that rehearsed way that comes from being good at first impressions and bad at boundaries. She sat closer to him than anyone else did, leaned in when he spoke, laughed a beat too late, a beat too loud. My boyfriend didn't shut it down. He didn't encourage it outright either. He let it happen. That middle space where deniability lives, and that's when something in my head clicked into place. Not anger, not jealousy, just clarity. I realized the relationship was already over, not because of Marla specifically, but because he needed this. He needed an audience. He needed leverage. He needed to feel like he was choosing me instead of simply being with me. I wasn't interested in auditioning for my own relationship. A few minutes later, he stood up and said he was going to grab another drink. Marla was on her feet before he even finished the sentence. They walked toward the bar together, close enough that anyone watching would assume they came as a pair. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, said a quick goodbye to the friend whose birthday it was, and walked out. No announcement, no scene, no dramatic exit, just me leaving a situation that no longer involved me. I sat in my car for a moment before driving, not to calm down, to think through logistics. Then I went home. The apartment was quiet when I got there. I grabbed a couple of duffel bags and started packing only what was mine. Clothes, laptop, toiletries, important documents, things I actually used. I didn't rush, but I didn't linger either. By the time I was done, the place already felt less like home. When he came back later that night, I was gone. I stayed with a friend that night, texted her from the car, asked if her couch was free. She said yes without questions, which I appreciated. I slept a few hours, woke up early, and went straight to work like nothing unusual had happened. Around mid-morning, my phone started lighting up. Missed calls, messages, first confused, then annoyed, then escalating fast. He asked where I went, then why I left without telling him, then accused me of embarrassing him. Apparently, he came back to the table, realized I was gone, and spent the rest of the night explaining my absence to people who suddenly knew too much about our relationship. I didn't respond. Around noon, he sent a longer message saying we needed to talk like adults and that disappearing was manipulative. That one actually made me laugh. I replied once, just once, and told him I moved out and that we could talk about logistics later. That flipped a switch. He called immediately. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. How could I do this over nothing? How Marla was just a friend. How I was insecure. How I was throwing away something good because I couldn't handle a little attention competition. I muted the conversation and went back to work. After work, I returned to the apartment to get the rest of my things. I timed it for when he said he'd be out. I didn't want a scene. When I walked in, the place already felt different, like a hotel room I'd checked out of mentally. I packed the last boxes, took photos of everything I left behind, and cleaned the areas I'd used. Practical habits die hard. I left my keys on the counter and took one last look around. That's when I noticed something else. My name had already been removed from his social media. Not blocked, just erased, like I'd been a placeholder he finally replaced with empty space. That should have hurt. Instead, it confirmed I'd read the situation correctly. As I was loading the last box into my car, he pulled into the parking lot. He got out fast, face tight, already mid-argument before he reached me. He asked if this was some kind of punishment, asked if I expected him to beg, asked if I really thought I could do better. I looked at him and told him I wasn't competing. I was opting out. He smirked again and said he had options. I told him I knew. Then I drove away. This is the part people usually don't believe, so I'll be very specific. His best friend's name was Adrian. He was 29. We'd known each other the entire relationship. He'd been around for dinners, birthdays, lazy Sundays. He was the calm counterweight to my boyfriend's chaos. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who listens instead of waiting to talk. I didn't pursue him. That part matters. About a week after I moved out, Adrian texted me. Nothing dramatic, just asked if I was okay. Said he'd heard things and wanted my side because the story he was getting didn't line up. We met for coffee in the middle of the day, neutral place, no drinks, no ambiguity. I told him exactly what happened, start to finish, without embellishing anything. I didn't trash my ex. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Adrian filled in the rest without realizing it. Apparently, my ex had been venting to him for months, complaining that I was too stable, too predictable, not exciting enough. At the same time, he was panicking about losing me because I made his life feel secure. Adrian said it sounded like he wanted to keep me while auditioning replacements. That coffee ended without a hug, without flirting, without anything inappropriate. We paid separately and went back to our lives. But something shifted after that, not loudly, quietly. Adrian and I started talking more. Texts turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into dinners. Still slow, still cautious. There was an unspoken understanding that this was delicate territory, and neither of us was interested in turning it into drama. Eventually, Adrian said something that stuck with me. He said he'd always felt like a background character in my boyfriend's life. Useful when needed, ignored otherwise. Watching me leave the way I did had forced him to reevaluate a lot of things. That sentence lingered with me longer than I expected because it echoed something I hadn't articulated yet. Leaving didn't just change my life. It disrupted a pattern other people had normalized around him. When we finally decided to try dating, we agreed on 2 rules. Total transparency and zero secrecy. If it felt wrong at any point, we would stop. It didn't feel wrong. It felt calm, easy, like I didn't have to brace myself for the next test or provocation. No games, no reminders of options, no smirks meant to measure my reaction. The irony wasn't lost on me. My ex found out 3 weeks later. That's when things escalated. He didn't hear it from me. He heard it the way people like him always do. Sideways, through screenshots, through half sentences dropped into group chats, through that sudden shift where mutual friends start acting strange without explaining why. He texted me late one night asking if it was true. I waited before replying, not to be dramatic, but to be accurate. Then I said yes, I was seeing Adrian, and no, it wasn't an accident or a rebound. His response came fast and chaotic. He said it was a betrayal, said Adrian was disloyal, said I was cruel for doing this on purpose, said I had crossed a line and this proved I'd been planning something behind his back the whole time. The speed with which he rewrote the timeline was almost impressive. In his version, he was suddenly the injured party. I didn't argue with the story. I corrected one thing. I reminded him he'd been very clear about having options. I had simply exercised mine without announcing them. Then I blocked him. Everywhere. Phone, text, social media, email. Any place where he could reach me or watch me. Gone. That was the real escalation, because he wasn't used to losing access. The fallout still happened, just without me in it. He spiraled publicly. Vague posts about betrayal, about fake friends, about women who couldn't handle confident men. He never named names, but he didn't need to. Anyone who knew us could connect the dots. Adrian handled it the opposite way. He didn't post, didn't explain, didn't defend. He quietly stepped back from people who fed on drama and focused on his own life. The contrast was impossible to miss. Dating Adrian felt almost boring by comparison, and I mean that in the best way. We made plans and kept them. We talked things through instead of staging them. No tests, no threats, no reminders of options. One night, Adrian told me something that explained everything. He said my ex used to joke that I was safe, but temporary, someone to keep around until something better came along. He said he never laughed at those jokes. That was the moment I knew blocking my ex wasn't petty. It was necessary. You can't move forward while someone keeps trying to pull you back into their game. And once he lost access to me entirely, he lost the only leverage he ever had. What I heard afterward came through other people, usually prefaced with, "I didn't want to get involved." Apparently, he told anyone who would listen that Adrian and I had been emotionally involved for months, that I checked out long before leaving, that the whole thing had been planned. None of it stuck for long. Too many details didn't line up. Timelines contradicted themselves. Screenshots conveniently started after the breakup. People noticed, quietly at first, then more openly. Adrian lost a friend group almost overnight, not because he did anything wrong, but because he refused to play defense. He didn't argue his case, didn't counterpost, didn't explain himself to people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. That cost him socially, and I won't pretend it didn't bother me. But what replaced it was better. We built our own routines slowly. Weeknight dinners, long walks, talking without checking phones every 5 minutes. He didn't need constant validation. He didn't test me to see if I'd react. He assumed good intent until proven otherwise. That alone felt radical. A few weeks later, I ran into Marla by coincidence at the gym. She recognized me immediately, looked me over with a smile that tried to land somewhere between curiosity and superiority. She mentioned my ex casually, asked if we were still talking. I told her no. She nodded like she'd expected that, then said he was exhausting, that he talked constantly about winning and losing, about proving something to someone who wasn't there anymore, about how unfair it was that I hadn't chased him. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Around 2 months after everything blew up, the practical loose ends finished tying themselves off. The lease renewal notice came through email. He renewed on his own. I transferred my utilities out cleanly. No disputes, no arguments, no dramatic final conversations. Just paperwork catching up to decisions already made. Adrian and I took our time defining what we were, not because there was doubt, but because neither of us felt the need to rush into labels to prove anything. What surprised me most was how quiet my head became. I hadn't realized how much mental bandwidth my ex had been consuming until he was gone. The constant vigilance, watching tone, choosing words carefully, anticipating reactions, all of that disappeared. One night, Adrian said I seemed lighter, not happier in a dramatic way, just steadier, like someone who wasn't bracing for impact anymore. He was right. We ran into my ex once after that. Random grocery store, different aisles, same checkout line. He was with someone new, taller, louder, overly affectionate in a way that felt rehearsed. He saw us. His posture changed immediately. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Adrian nodded politely. That was it. In the car afterward, Adrian asked if I was okay. I told him yes and meant it. There was no surge of emotion, no satisfaction, no bitterness, just confirmation. The last ripple came from a place I didn't expect. About 3 months in, my ex tried to re-enter my life indirectly. Mutual friends, old co-workers, even one of my cousins, always framed as concern, always disguised as closure. He wanted to talk just once. No drama, just adults. I declined every time without responding personally. I told people I was fine and didn't need mediation. Most respected that. A few pushed. I stopped engaging with them too. Adrian noticed before I said anything. He asked if my ex was still circling. I said yes, but it wasn't getting closer. He nodded and said something simple. People like that don't miss you. They miss access. That was it. My ex didn't want me back. He wanted confirmation that he could still pull me back if he chose to, that I was still an option on his shelf, even if he wasn't using it. Not giving him that confirmation was apparently unbearable. Meanwhile, my life kept getting quieter and better. Work stabilized. I got promoted into a role with less chaos and more control. Adrian and I took a short trip together. Nothing flashy. A rented cabin. Bad weather. No cell service. It was perfect. One night by the fireplace, Adrian admitted something I hadn't known. He said watching me leave when I did snapped him out of years of normalizing chaos. That felt strange to hear. Not like pride. More like responsibility. A reminder that boundaries don't just protect you. They show other people what's possible. I'll end it cleanly, because that's how it actually ended. There was no final confrontation, no apology that changed anything. Life just kept moving in 2 different directions. When my ex smirked and said he had options, it wasn't a threat. It was information, and I treated it like information. I didn't compete. I didn't argue. I didn't try to reassert my value to someone already shopping for leverage. I used my option. And it turned out to be an upgrade. Not because Adrian was better on some imaginary scoreboard, but because the relationship itself was better, healthier, simpler, real. I didn't leave angry. I didn't leave bitter. I left clear.